Hi, friends. It's me, host Eric, the host of Talking with Fan People and proud recipient of a copyright strike. Michelle shocked? You can totally go fuck yourself. You can totally go fuck yourself, Michelle shocked. She's got this business plan where she wants none of her shit to be accessible at all via the internet, and I guess I played 22 seconds of one of her songs, probably on a live stream or something. I got a copyright strike. I had to attend a copyright school. Now, the nice thing is copyright strikes expire after a certain amount of time if you go to copyright school. I really try hard not to be a copyright violator. I mean, the thing is, I'm not in any way, shape, or form somebody who should be copyright violated. I am making all my own videos. Like that 22 seconds of Michelle Shock song, it's like that was in probably like a 3-hour long live stream. It's like, fair use includes percentage of the thing that you're using, that the amount of thing you're using, what percentage does that comprise of the total thing that you're making? That's one of the considerations in fair use. But yeah, is sloth really a sin? I don't think so. I'm not buying that one. Isn't COVID basically society saying be more slothful? Well, I mean, it's fine. It's like, I accept that I have to be super careful about that. I try to be, but I also understand that some people are like awful bitches. Like, Michelle Shock doesn't have to make it such that I get a strike, right? When YouTube notifies you when somebody like uses part of your video or whatever, and you can decide what to do about it. It's like you can say that's fine, they can use it, I don't care, or you can say, no, I want to take it down, or you can say like, I want them to take it down and punish them. I tell you what's definitely not a sin, says Isaiah Rude. Lust for INFJ chicks. Well, that's good news for me. And you, apparently. Sloth is really just a condiment. On what kind of food do you spread sloth onto? I woke up at like 9:30 after staying up not super late. But I slept till like 9:30 in the morning, and then I was up for like 2 hours and was about to go take another nap, and I lay down for a while. I just couldn't quite fall asleep. Banana bread goes great with sloth and cheese. Whipped sloth and cheese. Creamy whipped sloth and cheese. Coleslaw is good. Yeah, I agree with you there. Coleslaw is the favorite food of Gary Oldman. Gary Oldman. Sloth over steak is the apotheosis of French cuisine. That's a wonderful sentence. I like that sentence. So yeah, I'm feeling kind of slothful today, and I'm not going to deny it. I'm going to own it. But if in fact sloth is a sin, does that mean that God hates sloths? That seems kind of mean to sloths. 6 plus 12 is 18. It's not 22. Your mom's face is 22, but the rest of her body is 65. The big game. God doesn't hate sloths. He just hates sloth. you carry the 4, add the 6, and divide by 66 plus the other 93. Okay, well, that makes sense. Are you just a little slothy or straight up slothful? Well, I would call my living environs slothy, but not squalid. If you were to assume that my living environs are representative of me and my spirit, that the person's spirit imbues the living environs, then I think you'd say that ours is a slothful environs. But not squalid. We try to prevent ourselves from getting too squalorly in our ways. Okay, don't think you can even argue modular arithmetic with 22. Seven deadly sins were written by monks. They're not specifically in the Bible. What is my favorite philosophical school of thought? Dan Brown's Philosophy Town. It's a private philosophy academy in Denver, Colorado. Dan Brown's Philosophy Town. That's my favorite philosophical school of thought. Philosophical schools of thought are as silly as martial arts schools. You know, like, oh, he's a master of the kendo form, but he's a master of the mana form. You know, it's like they're just punching each other and kicking each other. What are you talking about? No, not that Dan Brown. This is Dan Jehoshaphat Brown. His middle name's Jehoshaphat. Dan J. Brown. Dan Brown's Philosophical Town. It's a private philosophy academy. They periodically go and have tournaments against other schools of philosophy, you know. Don't diss your dojo. Yeah. Philosophy is a lot like Cobra Kai. The world of philosophy is a lot like the world of Cobra Kai. Yeah, well, that's one of our biggest rivals, you know. Last year, Anne brought a couple utilitarians to the meet, and you know, we were surprised. We expected rule consequentialists, not straight up utilitarians, but we still brought a deontological hammer and smashed their asses. My philosophical school of thought is sloth before envy. Envy before, what are the 7 deadly sins? It's sloth, envy, lust, gluttony. See, okay, look, here's the thing. Aren't really sloth and lust forms of gluttony? Aren't they really? I think they kind of are. I think that there's a poor taxonomy here. So sloth, envy, lust, gluttony, spite. Is spite one of them? Is spite a sin? Pride. Pride. What's the other 2? That's 5. We got 5 so far. We got gluttony, lust, envy, sloth, pride, greed, and wrath. Okay, wrath is like spite. Okay. So it seems like greed, sloth, and lust are all forms of gluttony, doesn't it? Yeah, it does get you bonus points, Laura Cuthbert. How many dimensions are there on a 4-dimensional flat surface? Well, there has to be at least 4 because they're on a 5th dimension then, right? Using that preposition implies a 5th dimension, doesn't it, David Sanderson? Yes, it does. And that's when you get into that great 70s like man band. It's like a boy band, but with men in it. It's called the 5th dimension. It's like a bunch of guys who do like jazzy singing stuff. You ever heard of the 5th dimension? It's a man band. a grown-up boy band, I guess, for jazz aficionados. It's the Dave Matthews Band of Menudos. That's a good Jeopardy question. They've been referred to as the Dave Matthews Band of Menudos. What is the fifth dimension? Look, if I'm putting something on a flat surface, right, then that flat surface exists in only 2 dimensions. So if I'm putting a 4-dimensional thing on top of it, then it must be 6 dimensions, I guess, huh? Unless the 4-dimensional thing that's on top of it co-opts one of the dimensions of the 2-dimensional thing. All I know is that whatever happens, it forms the shape of my penis. And then that becomes infinitely, overwhelming of the universe. I mean, my penis subsumes the universe. Is that what you're trying to argue, David Sanderson? You've been subsumed by my penis? You're right. You and everyone else. That's the way the universe ends. Everything gets sucked back into my scrotum. That's how it ends in trillions of years. And Skyler's going to be like, fuck, I can't believe Eric was serious that day when he said that. I'm like, yeah, I was. And Chris Ebert's going to think to himself, gosh, I wish I had asked him advice about real estate at the time, because if the whole universe ends by going back into his scrotum, it must have begun from emerging from his scrotum. That's my origin mythology, is that everyone's universe came out of their own scrotum, and it ends by going back into their own scrotum, and women are just imaginary. Is Sloth really a sin? I don't think so. Lauren Cuthbert and her flatmate are both playing Slothy Von Slothertons because why? Because they're full of COVID. They're chock full of delicious, frothy COVID. Don't touch Lauren Cuthbert. She's full of delicious, frothy COVID. Yeah, I could do some of that. The 8th sin, farting in someone's coffin just before they close it. I'm not sure that would quite qualify as a sin. Borrowing a car and not putting any gas in it. I think the 8th deadly sin is not adhering to the principle of reciprocal burdens. That's the 8th deadly sin. Being an ESFP. Fisting's not a sin. Fisting is what you do to relieve yourself if you're overwhelmed with the sin of sloth. Because nothing's more motivational than a good, hard fisting. Why are these sins so deadly? Good question. Because they're imbued with poisonous gas is the answer to the question. Boy, those new Attack on Titan episodes go by so fast. It's just like I started, it's over in a second. The soul is stored in the balls. Correct. All of your souls are inside my testicles. Well, they were originally. It's like the universe began. One day I was sitting in a complete void, doing nothing. And then I opened an incognito browser window and Googled Sasha Grey. And then the next thing I knew, the universe. You're a sloth. Like you are the sin itself. you are a sloth, you're one of those creatures that moves very slowly and lives in the tree, or remember, Tiny Man 66, we've already made the determination in today's metaphysics lesson that women are imaginary and that every man births the universe from his own testicles concurrently. You're a moomin. You're the slothist. So anyway, can I just offer a hearty FU to Michelle Schock for giving me a copyright strike? I'm the living emolument of sloth. I don't know that word. You've got me to Google a word now. Congratulations, Greeting Wisdom. Thank you for that. If it turns out to be a real word, let's find out. A salary, fee, or profit from employment or office. Emolument.
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 Emolument. It's pronounced emolument. Oh, it is a word though. Emolument. Interestingly. If I were the living emolument of sloth, I'd be the reward that is paid to you for your sloth. So by being slothful and watching this live stream right now, I comprise the emolument of your sloth. I saw you. I saw it, David Sanderson. Let me see what it. Copy link address. I gotta open a notepad. I gotta push paste. I gotta take out the studio dot. Michelle Schock. Why you want to be like that? You know? Why you want to be like that? Vouch versus Destiny debate. Morality of Kyle Rittenhouse. Sounds like torture. What's a Finland? A Finland is any place that's got too many consonants. You can determine a place's Finland level by how many consonants they have. So ironically, Iceland actually has more Finland in it than Finland does. You love Vouch and Destiny? Why don't you marry him then? Why don't you marry him, Tiny Man 66? Huh? Go ahead. Marry them right now. Both of them at the same time. Yeah, it's fair. You said you love him. That means you have to marry him. That's the rule. First comes love, then comes marriage, then comes the baby with the baby carriage, is the old saying. Now you are required to marry both of them and have both of their children at once. So you're going to have twins, one of them fathered by one man's sperm, the other by the other man's sperm. And then they'll be born debating each other. Why does it sound like torture? Well, basically, it's because all debates on morality collapse down in certain ways. So I've had all the debates on morality. I know all the arguments about it. It's frustrating to watch people who are debating topic with a less than complete understanding of it, I guess. It's like, what I've described before is the best argumentation about it, that you can universalize negative moral obligations, that you have to delegate positive moral indications to some sort of magical thinking frame. And that's really all there is to it, It's like deontology works on a negative rights level, and sort of, mostly, but we can't totalize any ideology, and thus you got to be kind of meta-rationalist about the whole thing. So is it frustrating to watch people argue stark positions on the thing as though either of them were correct? Yes. You realize the title was meant to be provocative, but to answer the question, sloth is a sin if it's willful. I mean, I don't think that I'm ever willfully slothful, but I recognize that sometimes I'm just not feeling it, and sometimes that can stretch on for some period of time. I would say that the sins that I am most susceptible to is sloth. If you were going to talk about the 7 sins, I'm most susceptible to sloth / gluttony, and my gluttony and my sloth kind of go together. Am I slothfully willful? Like, I mean, I always feel like I'm doing something wrong when I, for example, cancel a session with a client, like especially my teaching client, because I'm not feeling it, I'm just not feeling like it. And that's the excuse I give them too. I don't lie about it, but that in my mind is me being slothful. It's like I'm being too selfish, I'm being too selfish in that instance. It's like other people have their shit going on too, and I need to not just be so much of a, like child, I guess, So in those instances, I do feel like I'm kind of being wicked when I'm being too slothful. I have a sense in general that, like, God, I need to do something here. I'm just sitting around watching too much anime. I definitely have that sense. But see, this is what I'm saying about gluttony. Gluttony would seem to be a category that would include lust, sloth, and here you go, Tiny Man 66. It's a hug. Okay. Don't worry. I'm not trying to cop a feel. Well, this is the thing. The debate is about the morality of self-defense in the case of Kyle Rittenhouse. Oh, okay. I don't know who Kyle Rittenhouse is, so I assumed it was. I didn't know it was about an actual case. That makes it a lot more interesting. I thought it was about like a YouTuber named Kyle Rittenhouse or something. If it's actually about a case where somebody shot somebody and whether or not they were justified in their self-defense in that instance, then it's a much more interesting debate, because you're talking about something that should have a definitive answer, and that the definitive answer is going to be determined by facts and evidence, not by it'll be determined at least half by facts and evidences, and framework will function as framework then, not just as not as the point of argumentation fundamentally. The problem with most arguments about morality is that framework becomes the fundamental point of argumentation, but people still try to argue it on a contention level. If you have a case like this where you have specifics that are being referenced, it's a lot more of an interesting debate for me to watch, because then I too don't know ahead of time what the right answer is. That's what's frustrating for me, is watching people debate about something and knowing what the best arguments are regarding the matter and what the best responses are to everything regarding what they're saying and stuff is frustrating, because it's like, it's frustrating in a way that was sort of like hit me with a bit of NI force last night when Rachel and I were eating dinner with my dad. And I was asking him about the impeachment process and the way that he spoke so intelligently about everything, with such depth about everything that I asked questions about. And I realized, I'm very uniquely blessed in this way. I grew up with this my whole life. My dad never talked to me any differently than he does now. So it didn't matter what age I was. He expected me to be an adult, basically. So in terms of my language, my intellect, and so forth. Did you use TE to proofread yourself? Well, I would say proofreading and editing is taking an interface approach intentionally to what you've already expressed. So it's like, when I edit and proofread, I'm unlikely to find TI problems. It's much more likely to be NI problems, a lack of concision. Every time I write something, if I want to improve it, I need to make it shorter. I need to cut and edit down, right? Oh, well, I've got this. My daughter brought me this circle light. It's like this big. I don't know. I started to explain it. I could take the camera off and show it to you, but I have to unscrew the camera. It's really cool though. I'm shocked by how much how I use it all the time, because see, normally anything that takes a little bit of extra setup or whatever, I end up not really using it very much. Like, for example, the green screen, because when I want to live stream, I want to just talk about what I want to talk about. And to me, it always seems like, well, the visuals are totally irrelevant here, really. I mean, who cares? This thing is it's just the same exact experience listening to it as it is watching it. If you were just going to consume and not engage, not interface with it, The two-toed sloth, basically sleepy INTPs. I mean, the thing is, INTPs in particular seem to have this notion that when they're not doing something, they really should be conserving their energy in case they have to do something. It's like, that's a tough lesson for an ENTP to learn, that you have a limited amount of energy and you have to conserve some of it and stuff, right? But INTPs take it to the next level. They prioritize energy conservation in case they need to do something over energy expenditure to do something. So, oh, what are you doing? I'm conserving my energy right now. For what? Well, I don't know. The world might demand something of me. Okay, INTP, when you've thought out all the possible things the world might demand of you and all the possible ways that you might respond to all those possible things, I guess you'll be ready to take action? No, then I'll be able to relax. Once I finally anticipated everything that could be demanded of me, so I'll never be surprised by it, then I can relax. When's that going to happen? 84 years old, I will begin relaxing. INTP, I spend 83 years preparing to relax by conserving energy, and then the rest of my life I spend relaxing. I think even when they're doing that kind of stuff, playing video games, like strategy games and stuff, even then, they're applying that same principle. So, they're not exerting themselves unnecessarily or extroverting themselves unnecessarily in the process of doing that, you know? You should never eat fish, Leaf Trimmer. That was your number one mistake. Fish are made to swim, not to be eaten, okay? Cows are made to be eaten. Fish are gross. Nobody likes them. Why? They taste what? Fishy. What's that another word for? Shady. What's shady about fish? Their fishy taste, for one thing. Self-preservation is useful? Never. And it's a really long time. It's a Prince song. You know, Prince was famous for doing this. And yet women found him very attractive for some reason. He was, I guess, what you'd call flamboyantly heterosexual, oxymoronic though that might sound. There's no man who did a better job of enticing women by acting girly than Prince. I think that's fair to say, right? Ricky Martin, he's gay though, right? Prince is heterosexual, or was. I mean, now he's dead. Good old Prince, dead of, I believe, fentanyl, right? Like the same thing that kills everybody these days. Everybody's dead of fentanyl. Ryan Seacrest. Okay, well, Ryan Seacrest is very metrosexual. I wouldn't call him expressly girly in any way, whereas Prince is like girly. Yeah, Prince died a couple of years ago. I saw him at the Forum before he died with my ex-wife. We went to the Forum one night. She was a big Prince fan. No, not a new camera. I just have the light on. It's well, I'll show you what. I this is something Delilah got me. I guess for I don't know what for some holiday or something, maybe Christmas or something. It's this kind of light thing. It's got this stand on it, and so since the camera screws onto it, it's actually an easier way to deal with the camera than just setting it down over there. So I just started using it, and then it's like pretty convenient. It's super adjustable, and it goes up pretty high too. Maybe you pull these legs out all the way. Yeah. See how high up that is? That's pretty high up. Still can cut off the top of my head. But that's a good thing because why? Of my baldness. Nobody wants to see that. All the ladies look at it and they go, ew! I don't want to see your bald head, Eric. Well, it's just life in the big city. Prince was talking about chemtrails in one of his last interviews. I mean, Prince was nuts, right? He was kind of Michelle Shocktish in his anti-internet approach, apparently. And if you haven't heard, I got a copyright strike this morning. Fortunately, I like their copyright protocol with strikes because unlike community guideline strikes, a copyright strike will expire if you go to copyright school, which I did this morning. yeah, Trump got acquitted. And the thing that was incredibly frustrating to me is that well, what did he die of then, Leaf Tremor? I don't remember. Anyway, you know, the fact that they acquitted Trump doesn't matter to me one way or the other. Like if they had found him guilty or acquitted, I had no preference on it. But what really makes me angry is that the people who voted to acquit Trump used as their reasoning that the trial itself was unconstitutional. But the Senate itself is the one that caused it to occur, and the issue of constitutionality had been ruled on prior to the impeachment trial. So in other words, and they never argued the constitutionality issue within the impeachment trial. So what does that tell you? It tells you they voted on framework even though it wasn't argued in the round, and that's not okay. You know, it's like if the framework issue of constitutionality was adjudicated prior to the case, then they shouldn't use it as a justification for voting to acquit. You know, that's not acceptable. That's not how logic or reason or decency works. Okay, Swift Eagle, but the thing is, the problem is this. That was fine. If the Republicans had argued during, or whoever voted to acquit, had argued during the actual impeachment trial, this constitutionality issue that had been resolved prior to the trial, that it was still an issue for them, and they were still planning on voting on it, then I would have been fine with it. But since they didn't make those arguments during the trial, they can't claim to vote on them afterwards. That's it. That's fucking reality, you know? Even if they're right about the constitutionality thing, it doesn't matter if they don't make the arguments in the correct forum. And then they can't make the wrong arguments afterwards to make up for it. You know, it's like, fucking reality doesn't work like that. Of course, one of the main reasons I'm happy that he was actually acquitted is because it helps me talk to Legends Fall a little bit. Okay, so I mean, Legends Fall. Let me explain a couple of things to you. Like, I agree with you on the constitutional issue that there's no point in, and it makes no sense to, impeach a president who's no longer a sitting president, right? But the fact that you claim the prosecution lost in 5 different ways is not supported by anything that was argued in the case. Now, granted, this is secondhand for me. I asked my dad a lot of specific questions about what they argued and how they argued it and what their reasoning was, and I got very specific answers because my dad's good at thinking and reasoning and stuff, you know. So what he no, I didn't. That's true, Legends Fall. But what I'm trying to say is you've got one person who's saying that he thought the prosecution was unconstitutional. This is my dad, right? And who's also argued that Trump did some very important things, that he was a necessary slate wiper, okay? Who had no horse in the race at all, and who says, I mean, it's clear cut to everybody, including those who acquitted him, that in fact the prosecution did make its case regarding incitement or whatever. Now, that's my dad telling me this. Keep in mind, he's making a disinterested calculus. You've never said anything that hasn't been pro-Trump about Trump. You've never revealed to me that you're capable of that kind of disinterested calculus my father is capable of and consistently displays. So obviously I have a lot more faith in his objectivity than yours. Okay, so you don't understand how the burden of proof works in an impeachment trial then. Okay, well, look, what I agree regarding the high bar for incitement. And what my father additionally said was that if, in fact, there had been a second impeachment article on dereliction of duty, that it would have been incredibly difficult to justify voting to acquit, much more so than with the impeachment article they did bring. So I would concede that that's a good argument. Timeline's actually in favor of incitement, objectively. 5 is difficult to prove regardless. So it's part of the high bar for incitement. It's not a separate thing. Timeline is also part of the high bar for incitement. So you've got one argument unconstitutional. 2, First Amendment's irrelevant. That's not protected speech, what he's being accused of. So you have 1 unconstitutional that was resolved prior to the trial. In other words, that was ruled on as a separate matter, and it was ruled that the Senate chose to make it constitutional when they voted to move forward with the trial. So that was ruled on ahead of time, and I've already addressed that and said that if they had made those arguments in the case, fine, but they didn't, okay? First Amendment is bullshit because that's not protected speech, but he's being accused of. 3rd, 4th, and 5th are all part of 3, very high bar for incitement. I agree with you, a high bar for incitement is a good reason to acquit. That the prosecution didn't make its case adequately well. However, the general perspective on it is that the prosecution did make its case quite strongly, and certainly would have made the case, as my dad says, for a dereliction of duty. So okay, so see, this is an example of bad thinking, Legends Fall. You're still presuming the fundamental point in question is called begging the question. They fucked it up. Every time things don't go against Trump, it's a mistake by the nefarious parties. Every time things do go against Trump, it's a success by the nefarious parties. So no matter what happens, there's no way to prove that, in fact, nefarious parties aren't controlling things. Because every time it doesn't go as the nefarious parties would hypothetically want, it's just a mistake by them, right? It's called avoiding falsifiability. And that is why you fail. Right. And there was one specific person who was in charge of determining the issue of constitutionality. And the reasoning he provided was that the Senate rendered it constitutional when they chose to impeach. They put in motion a set of processes that need to be completed before you can say they're done. So holding this trial is constitutional. Now, the thing is, you might still disagree with that. I believe, well, my dad said, I believe, he said this, so he's not sure of it, but he said, I believe that Roberts declined to hear the case. Okay, well, look, if we can't agree on any kind of real facts, then we can't really have any conversation. So it's like, your basic premise is that no matter what facts I point to, because they were sourced from some media outlet, they themselves are suspect. So, I mean, there's nothing I can do to talk to you anymore then. You're not engaging in a way that both parties can access the playing field, right? You're just saying my intuition is correct no matter what. No matter what evidence. My intuition is correct. Evidence that contradicts my intuition is doctored. Evidence that contradicts my intuition is part of the conspiracy. And so then there's nothing. No, that's not what I'm doing, Legends Fall. If, in fact, they were successfully pulling the strings, he would have been found guilty, right? No, but Legends Fall, listen to me. If, in fact, they were successfully pulling the strings, he would have been found guilty, right? Right? You're the one who said they messed up, right? So they messed up, right? You can't have it both ways. Either you're right that he should have been acquitted, in which case they messed up, or you're wrong, he should have been convicted, in which case they still messed up, right? Okay, but again, if in fact they were competent then at pulling strings, they wouldn't have messed up, right? No, I'm not doing terrible TI, Legends Fall. That's just bullshit. Right, Legends Fall, I'm attacking the most unstable part of what you say, which is the way you justify things regarding Trump. I don't see this regarding other things. Okay, so if in fact they had no evidence, then they, the mysterious string pullers, are terrible at their job, or they messed up because Trump started talking 45 minutes later than they expected, right? Okay, fine. So maybe you are correct that I don't dispute that you're correct that unnamed sources don't count as evidence. I agree with you. If you've got video evidence, if you've got audio evidence, if you've got okay, so are they incompetent, or did they want him to be acquitted? How effective are they as mysterious string pullers? If they fail here so dramatically, why do you afford them so much credit at being so successful so many other occasions? Why are they the ones who are controlling the frame of reference then, if they're so incompetent? Being evil and incompetent doesn't make you able to pull strings. It just makes you somebody in jail. Right? Rathor Vicky says, what? I don't want to argue with you about Trump anymore because, like I said, it doesn't matter what I say, you won't accept it as legitimate form of evidence of anything because you'll just say, well, like I said, it'll fit in your system no matter what. If it contradicts it, it's an example of them messing up or not being competent. If it supports it, then it's proof of them being evil, right? And they're just, you've chosen to find a non-falsifiable belief because you don't want it to be falsified, which means it's not worth anything. Okay, which type has the most flickery mind? They can change their decision at any point in time. My girlfriend, she's always so unsure. Maybe you're with the wrong woman, Rath or Vicky. Unsure about you or unsure about like what to do? Do I want chocolate or vanilla ice cream unsure, or do I want to be with Rath or Vicky unsure? The point is, at least some people who voted to acquit argued themselves that the prosecution had made their case well, but they were acquitting on the grounds of constitutionality. To me, when I heard that from my dad, I was still neutral about it until I asked the core question. Oh, did they argue the constitutionality part during the case itself, even after the issue had been decided? No. Okay, well, that says everything you need to know right there. Everything you need to know, right? So we know that at least some people who acquitted him voted on arguments not said in the round. So they can't vote on that. That's not legal. That's wickedness. That's the definition of evil. Voting on arguments not made in the round. The very definition of evil. Not voting for the strongest arguments. Justifying your decision with arguments not made in the round. The very definition of evil. If they had argued about it in the round, fine. Then vote for that. I wouldn't have been objecting to it at all. I didn't get mad until I clarified with my dad that they voted on something they never argued during the actual case. Wouldn't that make you mad? Should make any moral human being furious. So, the important thing to remember is there is no monolithic they of elites, okay? Every individual has their own motivations, desires, principles, ideas, political indications, whatever. There's no uniformity amongst the rich that they agree on the same sort of political policies. There's an ongoing battle sort of in the marketplace of ideas between identitarianism and individualism. Identitarianism is a form of communitarianism born of individualism that needs to be quashed. My dad was talking about this last night as well. He was saying that France is taking sort of a formal position against identitarianism because it runs afoul to the basic principles of equality, liberty, brotherhood. And it does, of course. You can't. You just can't. You just can't reduce people to identities you confer on them based on some group notion you have. Well, you can't do that successfully. It's not possible to do that in a way that's good. And that's what everybody keeps trying to do. Well, since people use identitarianism to commit all this wicked acts, then we need to frame our response to wicked acts through that same frame of identitarianism? No, that's wrong. We need to exclude that frame of identitarianism. And that's my core point, When the system that allows you to collectively be a career criminal, why are rich people career criminals? In what way is Bill Gates, for example, a career criminal? Do you think he didn't legitimately become rich via Windows? I mean, that's kind of silly, right? Sometimes perhaps come near to Christian tolerance, mildness, and love of one's neighbor. Man's moral weakness and sloth are what chiefly hinder the imitation. And it is to these that probabilism extends a practical understanding which may sometimes perhaps come nearer to Christian tolerance, mildness, and love of one's neighbor than the attitude of those who see probabilism as in probabilism a mere laxity. Right, this special category called dominant elites, of which there's no clear criterion to enter them, and of which there's no reason to presume that members of this subset are any less individuals than anybody else, and yet that's required for the assumption to be taken seriously. I should. This is probably a good way to get those hairs right there. Just burn them off of me with fire. With the power of fire. Have you guys ever heard of the power of fire? It's this stuff, you can burn things with it. I can't believe that regular people like me purchase these dangerous objects. Wow. We should definitely require a license for using fire, I think. The government needs to be involved in this. We need to regulate the use of fire more carefully. That's why you need to go to fire training school before being issued a license to get a lighter. I mean, just think what could happen if we let just anybody have access to fire making. I mean, people could burn down anything. God. We have a responsibility to prevent people from making fires by regulating the capacity to make fires. Isn't it kind of weird to think that in the status quo, we've got all these arguments about how the capacity to misuse justifies heaping regulations upon it. And concurrently, we allow any old person to buy gasoline and a lighter anywhere. Isn't that strange? And you know what's sad about it? There are a lot of people in the world right now with the current attitude of things, when extrapolating from the COVID response and so forth, who would say, you're right, we need to regulate fire making. Isn't that sad? Isn't that crazy? I bet you a lot of people would say that in response to what I'm saying right now. It's no longer just a ridiculous joke, right? I think vices in Catholicism are what leads to damnable sins, but aren't damnable in themselves. So being slothful doesn't put me straight to hell. I mean, as long as I do my Hail Marys and drink my holy water, don't I get absolved of that anyway if I'm serious about my remorse? I'm really sorry I was lazy yesterday, God. Maybe what should be my presidential platform? All these quotes you keep putting about Jung make me curious enough to almost read that book you gave me. When's his mom? He's a smart feller and a fart smeller. And you know what? Maybe he did knock those kids over with that other kid. Maybe he did. I don't know. Maybe he's just that badass. Maybe he really did swing one child around. Oh, yeah. Fire. Regulating the fire-making capacity of people as a presidential platform. Just like hard pitch the securitization angle. Do you know how much danger we're in? Danger, danger, danger everywhere. Everybody be alarmed. Quick, hurry up, be alarmed and vote for me. Yeah, she made me bagels. The funny thing is, like, yeah, no, I am. I mean, the thing is, I don't mind using that analogy to explain certain things. I would not like to just be a joke, I mean, I'm never going to be okay with that. Okay, well, staring at a woman lustfully is committing adultery in your heart. What I find is that some ogling is willful and some ogling is responsive or reflexive. Okay, so it's like, let's say I'm sitting at an outside table at a restaurant by a sidewalk. And Susie Von Big Tits walks by, right? My head's right here. I'm chatting with somebody. And then right here come bounce, 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 right? I'm going to unavoidably, reflexively look like and go, titties, That's not a sinful thing, because you can't expect anybody not to turn and look when there's a couple of big bouncing titties right next to their head, But it is the case that I've noticed in the past that I have two settings, either like scoping chicks or not scoping chicks. And when I turn it to not scoping chicks, I generally don't do that. Like I don't look at. Well, I still glance at them. It's a hard habit to break. You're driving down the street. There's some chick jogging, and she's got on like little spandex, like riding shorts, and a little spandex halter top, and it's like it's hard not to look at her. Just want to be like, but I generally don't. If I'm adequately busy thinking about stuff that is interesting, I hopefully won't notice that, like I find it a waste of my time and attention. So why I would notice it, I don't know, but it's just a natural man reflex or something. I mean, I don't disapprove of chicks dressing however they want to dress at all. And I think that the problem is like on the spectrum of Islam to liberation, the problem much more associates with the former than the latter in terms of sexual relations. I mean, individualism is always preferable to communitarian restrictions. So fundamentally, like these mores of sexual morality are communitarian in nature. And even if there are instances where communitarianism is kind of right, quote unquote, we have to prioritize individualism anyway, because it's one of those positive moral indications. It has to be delegated to a magical thinking frame. You can't reason it out logically. There aren't any good enough arguments for you to impose your frame of reference on others regarding that sort of thing, Reflexive is different than reflective, by the way, Leaf Trimmer. I said reflexive with an X. So, okay, look, the thing is, it is, nobody, I think, is, Leaf Trimmer, chill out. Nobody's trying to say that that there's not a difference between cat whistling some girl walking down the street and saying like, "Hey, baby," blah, 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 after her, versus a sort of reflexive glance. I think we all agree that there's a distinction between those two things, right? That actively ogling, especially if you're aware that you're making somebody uncomfortable, is obviously a very different thing than somebody who's reflexively glancing. I have a low opinion regarding Richard Dawkins. And my dad's a fan of Richard Dawkins, but not me. I find him, fundamentally arguing against straw men. He's arguing against what if you hide your glance as well? Then isn't the distinction meaningless? Well, you could argue that if the chick's never aware of it, that no harm done, no harm, no foul, right? However, that neglects the reality that you're taking a risk of her noticing and being made uncomfortable every time you do it, and that if you continue affording that legitimacy as a process based on the assumption that you're never going to fuck it up, then you're affording yourself too much credit, maybe. Yeah, my dad's a self-identified atheist. and kind of, but you know, he maintains close relationships with lots of people who are not atheists and sometimes has arguments with them. His sister continues to try to save his soul at the end of near the end of his life here. My dad's atheism is very much linked to his political science worldview, I guess. You know, he was a poli-sci professor. So he doesn't think that magical thinking frames ought to be relevant in public policy matters, for sure. So when I was a kid, he'd get angry at Christians insisting on crosses going up in public spaces. He was always about like the legitimacy of the forum and the legitimacy of the thing. And, you know, so he didn't seem to, he never, his position was, I don't care what your beliefs are, but don't try to force them on me, or don't try to make them, don't try to universalize what shouldn't be universalized, I guess. He never put in those terms, but that's basically what his position is. You know, when he got his PhD in philosophy, and probably he got his PhD in philosophy and thought it was interesting to do so, in large part because of his reaction against religion. He was raised in a very religious community in Pennsylvania Dutch country. He was Church of the Brethren, which is like, there's Amish, then there's Mennonites, and then there's Church of the Brethren in terms of hardcoreness. So Amish are the most hardcore, Mennonites are less hardcore than that, and Church of the Brethren are less hardcore than that, but they're still more hardcore than, you know, your average Protestant in the suburbs, right? So he has an odd relationship with it. He still has fondness for Church of the Brethren, and looked into a Church of the Brethren retirement community in Laverne. And one of the things he liked about it was that it was Church of the Brethren, and it has that link to his experience and his history. But he's fully rejected the notion of divinity because, I mean, ultimately he's anti-polar. What ultimately is any magical thinking frame worth its salt predicated on? Any magical thinking frame worth its salt is predicated on synergy. The fact that many things are emergent phenomena of a bunch of things working in coordination. So well, he's anti-polar. My dad's an ESTJ. So he doesn't realize that. He doesn't realize he's using magical thinking himself. Well, I mean, if you want to be a rationalist, that's fine. And then just reject God and Jesus. If you want to be a pure rationalist, go ahead. But don't, again, stop cake and eating it to him. You can't have it both ways, okay? God doesn't want you to be wrong. Remember that, Leaf Trimmer. God does not want you to be wrong. It's like I say about what I believe to be true Christianity abhors evangelism. It operates according to AA's principle of attraction, not promotion. And true Christianity respects that the secular world has dominion over rationalist concerns, and the magical thinking realms, magical thinking frames are relegated to those appropriate issues, namely positive moral indications for the self, for one's immediate family, perhaps, but not for the general populace. So that's all about giving Caesar his due, and respecting that secular reasoning and justification needs to be kept separate from magical thinking frames. That's part of what Jesus is trying to teach us. It's an important part of what he's trying to teach us. He's trying to teach us, don't mistake my teachings for things you can successfully justify logically or objectively. That's one of the key points he's making that you haven't picked up on yet, Leaf Trimmer. Yeah, separation of church and state for sure. Right. I know. That's the brilliance of co-opting the term as a Christian. I tend to take the best approach rhetorically towards a given situation like this. So it's like, why should atheists control the connotation of the expression magical thinking frame? For example, you right now are being the atheist's bitch. By rejecting the term, you are rejecting your own faith and rejecting your claim to your authentic moral high ground regarding the magical thinking frame. That's exactly what the atheists want. You bought into their reductionist, derisive use of the term magical thinking frame and allowed yourself to be convinced that Jesus is bad. The Jesus you want to believe in, the one that you can objectively prove, is bad because that's magical. I mean, it's like that's the one that you want to objectively prove is good, but doesn't exist, right? It's saying, I want Jesus to be not just significant in the magical thinking frame, but also in the rationalist thinking frame, except it doesn't work like that, right? Different frames of reference, different rules. Right. I agree with you, Gen Xio. They just don't. People like my dad, who's a rationalist, his explanation for things that one would normally pass off to a magical thinking frame are justified via utility, via that's just the way things are, or via, well, we don't know yet, or via some explanation like evolution. My dad's a big believer in evolution. If asked to explain like why we're here or how we came about, he would just say, basically, there is no meaning or purpose. It's just a natural phenomenon that occurs without any whatever. Well, right. So, I mean, the best title to self-identify as is the actual best way to be, which is be a meta-rationalist. Allow yourself to have real captaincy of your ontological self. It's like faith is part of your ontology. Don't be I feel in some sense about your own faith, you're kind of like a closeted homosexual acting super heterosexual in order to prove that they're not a homosexual is kind of how you are about your own faith. It's like, I'm going to insist it's super rational to hide the fact that I believe with my heart instead of my brain. And you can accept that part of yourself. It doesn't turn you into a mushy brain. It turns you into somebody who's being objective about yourself, Are certain people incapable of being meta-rational? Well, yeah, but Leaf Trimmer is at least purporting to be INTP, which would make him a meta-rationalist, a meta-analyst, which would make him a meta-analyst, which would make him capable of being a meta-rationalist. Are non-meta-analysts capable of being meta-rationalists? I think so. I think analysts can too. Maybe executives can too. I don't know if executors can. I don't think so. ESTJs, ISTJs, ESFPs, ISFPs. I'm not sure if they can really engage in meta-rationalism. It's their frame of reference is particular and their tool of usage is particular. So I don't see how they would exactly. But I mean, it may take a different manifestation in them because they're attending by a different configuration. One would imagine that each configuration can attain a kind of ultimately, what is meta-rationalism, or everything that I'm saying here, despite how it may come across, is really somebody who's attained intellectual humility. So it's like recognizing that I too am subject to the same linguistic limitations that are implicit to how we communicate with each other, and resigning oneself to recognizing natural borders of things that you can adjudicate and can't is being humble. I don't control all the narratives. I'm subject to the same rules everybody else is. Well, prior to these conversations about Trump, I was quite convinced he was an ESTP. After these conversations about Trump, I'm still very convinced he's an ESTP. This is not uncommon for ESTPs to get attached to NI at the expense of TI. I mean, my point is I'm giving each thing its due, right? So you're not allowing your faith-based self to own itself as itself. You're insisting it put on clothes as different, something else. You haven't learned that you've internalized the enemy's narratives about yourself, and tried to conform to them. You're like the what are they called? Elitians? The guys on Paradise Island in Attack on Titan. Yeah, Flow State is. Right now, I'm live streaming, David Sanderson. That's what I'm doing right now. I'm not looking at yeah. Well, I mean, I agree correct is correct. But the thing is this. Whether or not I should expect you to agree that it's correct is a separate question than whether or not it's correct. Okay? So even if you are correct, you are not correct to think that others should think you're correct. So in other words, I could approach by saying, gosh, I wish you could explain it better because I'm sure you're correct and I'd love to agree with you, but I haven't heard the kind of justifications I need to think that it universalizes as correct, right? So I agree with you that being correct is very important, but it's true that it's important not just for being correct, but it's also true that it's important that you're correct about whether or not others should agree that you're correct. And regarding that, you're wrong. Because if you're stating it out loud, you're saying, I believe Mia. If I say, do you think I should believe Mia? And you say, well, it's true. Then you're saying, yes, I think you should believe Mia as well. At that point, then it needs to meet certain criteria in order to be believed, right? I think so too. I think he's an ESTP. I don't find this to be an example of polar TI. I find it to be an example of force slot NI. Sin is a sloth. Let it whisper in your ear slowly. You have to be really patient with sin. It's shy. It comes, sniffs up at you carefully. Sorry, this doesn't pertain to the subject you're on, but were you my middle school speech and debate teacher? Probably, yeah. I mean, I was the middle school speech and debate teacher at Bay. So then, yes, I guess is the answer to that. Your name's Adam, you're an INTP. I don't remember an Adam INTP at Rebay. But I did have a lot of kids there, so maybe if I saw your face, I'd recognize you or something. Yeah, I'm still a debate coach, but I'm sort of semi-retired now, I guess. Making YouTube videos and shit, arguing with people on the internet about what comprises acceptable argumentation, and so forth. I'm also running for president in 2024. And so let's see. You must be 21 at least, right? Then, if you were with me when I was at Rebay, you must be 21 years old at least, ex-zombie, because I was at Rebay. Last year I was at Rebay is the last year Delilah was at Rebay, and she's now 22. But she was in 8th grade, so you could be 20, I guess. You could be as young as 20. Oh, so I only had you as a 6th grader. That's why I don't really remember you. You got second place in a competition in debate, or what? What topic are you debating? Are you debating college debate or what? Are you debating policy? Are you talking about speech or it's cool that you stuck with it. If you're an INTP, it's not surprising. It's you're naturally born to debate. I think they have LD in college and policy, and as far as I know, they don't have public forum in college, do they? Of course, college debate is so politicized; it's ridiculous. It would be very surprising if Richard Dawkins made a surprise appearance because he's dead. Oh, back at Rebecca. Oh, okay. All right. I thought you were saying, so Pissed Offerson interpreted you correctly and I interpreted you incorrectly. Oh, you got a second place back at Rebecca. Who knows what the topic was back when you were in 6th grade? I don't know. I have no recollection. Well, that's cool. So now you left college. That's good. Glad to hear that. College is a big waste of time and money. I'm proud of you. I'm so proud of you. Oh my gosh. Adam. Oh, Adam. That Adam. You are my all-time favorite student. I am so proud of you. I'm so proud of you. I'm going to transubstantiate you a bond right now. That's how proud of you I am. I am proud of you for finding my live stream. Thank you for that. I mean, the thing is, I got a fucking copyright strike for 22 seconds of a Michelle Shock song in probably an hours-long live stream. Richard Dawkins isn't dead? Are you sure? Has he risen like the Christ child? No, it's under 7 seconds or something. I could. The thing is, this copyright strike is going to drop off within 30 days. I generally am very careful about it. I should have been smarter about Michelle Shock because I went through this. She's gone to a great deal of length of effort to prevent anybody from being able to access any of her music online. So you have to buy her CDs that she's selling, like special edition CDs for $250 a piece. So I went to the Wayback Machine and I found a couple of instances that have been saved of audio files of hers. In fact, I made a video saying, here's how you can find her album that you can't find anywhere. But no, I'm not confusing Richard Dawkins with Stephen Hawking. Is there another famous atheist who died besides Richard Dawkins? Hitchens died. Okay, that's who I'm confusing him with then. What was Hitchens' first name? Christopher. Yeah, it's Christopher Hitchens that I don't have a lot of respect for. As far as Dawkins, I'm not sure about him. Christopher Hitchens is the atheist that I think is just like, okay, you just are arguing against the strawest of men. So I retract my earlier critique of Dawkins. That was actually directed at Hitchens. I don't know about Dawkins' position on things, really. I had mis-ID'd those two people. Yeah, but Hitchens was what I would call, the strawest of men. Probably an ISFJ, maybe, or maybe an ENTP. Dawkins straw man's even more. Okay, well, I don't know about Dawkins' arguments. I can't comment on them, but I know I've read one of Hitchens' books, I think, and Dawkins is a macroevolutionist. Does he make pro-evolution arguments? The thing is, I don't doubt that he was an ENTP. It's like I don't want him to be one, but he probably was. I see him as being full of weak arguments, chock full of weak-ass arguments. Interestingly, all four of the horsemen of the apocalypse are Aries. I mean, that's their... he might have been an ESTJ. My dad liked him. The thing is, whenever you're talking about somebody who's making pro-evolution arguments, pro-macroevolution arguments, they're almost always saying it as a negation to creationism. And of course, that's the wrong frame of reference. The reason evolution fails as an argument has nothing to do with religion, creationism, or anything else. It just fails to meet its burden as an affirmation. It doesn't explain what it purports to explain, and that's it. It's like nothing else to say about it. What types have RBF, resting bitch face? ESTJ for sure. My dad has it, hardcore. I never can tell what his mood is by looking at him. I might walk in a room and he looks at me like I am disgusted by this turd that just entered the room. And then he'll be like, do you want to go to Costco? I'll be like, not really. Are you mad about something? No, it's just how he looks, you know. He's always fooling me with his look of like contemptuous disgust at everything, you know. Women with resting bitch face are actually better communicators, as long as they're trying to communicate bitchy things. If they're trying to be sweet and adorable, that's probably not the case. You know what they say about me? That I'm tall and tan and young and lovely. And also that I, of course, am a girl from Ipanema. Which apparently is a beach in Brazil. Isn't that interesting? I feel you about not wanting to be a certain type. Well, oh, yeah. It's not intelligent, Eric. I think things that are made by intelligent beings. To deny God is understandable. To say the Big Bang is irrational. I mean, like, for example, canyons, we can both agree that a canyon is not made by an intelligent being, right? It's made by water eroding over time. Do we agree about that? I mean, we can point to plenty of examples of agents that are not intelligent, like volcanoes, for example, right? So a volcano is an intelligent being. It creates lava. Does that make it an intelligent being? I mean, it's not the case that every effect is caused by intelligent, willful action, right? Okay, but it's a creation. Even if you accept that it's a creation, rather than an emergent phenomenon of continental drift across fissures in the Earth's crust, even if we were to accept that the volcano was created as it was, we still have to accept that it's not intelligent and itself is something that creates lava, right? So it's not the case that all things that are created are willfully or intelligently created, correct? FBF, fiberglass radial blade centrifugal fan application. RBF fiberglass fan offers superior corrosion resistance to gases, fumes. And yes, okay, you being smarty pants, but okay. All right, so I'm not disputing you that I'm Christian myself. I don't really have any notion about where everything came from, though. I'm not. I don't. I don't think that's. I don't think I've heard any explanation that feels like an explanation to me. So I don't know what the answer to it is. God made everything doesn't feel like an explanation to me either. You know. So it may be correct, but I agree with you fundamentally that the Big Bang is not an explanation to anything. It just pushes the question back, right? Well, why before the Big Bang? You know? Oh, well, there wasn't any time back then. Okay, so if there's not any before, how can there be an after? You know? So I agree that that the Big Bang is not a rational explanation for anything, that evolution is not a rational explanation for anything because it doesn't withstand the scrutiny of reason. Just definitionally, it doesn't. And no matter how we define species meaningfully, if we're going to define them, we're going to have to include something about the fact that they give birth to other instances of themselves. That kind of precludes the genome from evolving, doesn't it? And we can see how there's a certain amount of plasticity within any given identity, and there's a limit to the plasticity within any given identity. So, for example, it is the case that I can make my muscles bigger by working out, make myself have better wind by running more, and so forth. And it's also not the case that I can flap my arms enough to get wings. So there's a limit to the plasticity of anything that has an identity. You can express it in varying ways, but not so much so or become something different. Think about a song. We could all sing Mary Has a Little Lamb a little bit differently, but if one of us chooses to sing it with different words and different melody, then it's not Mary Had a Little Lamb anymore. So it's part of the nature of identity, of holistic truth, that things of a nature are of a nature. A species is a genome that all evolutionary forces continue to push it back to the genomic mean, continue to try to work to keep the genome healthy, which is to say to exclude things foreign to that genome, and gradually over time fail to exclude everything foreign to that genome. And that's how we get genetic diseases and stuff. So, that's a correct understanding of a genome, right? It's a correct understanding of a species is something that has and sustains its identity across time, not as something that changes its identity across time. Languages evolve, but languages are not correctly understood as species. So, for example, a word is only relatively absolute, not absolutely relative. So what that means is a pigeon is necessarily a pigeon. It never changes what it is, right? So as a consequence, the genome of pigeons, assuming you're a member of that species, it means you're within a very degree of deviation from the mean. If you deviate far enough from it, you can no longer produce viable offspring. You're no longer a member of the same species, or you're no longer a viable organism at all. It's been established already that there are no good mutations. They're all deleterious, and that the best of them are nearly neutral. Epigenetics shows that some of those deleterious but nearly neutral genes do enter the genome over time, but that doesn't explain the genome changing over time. So in many, many ways, we can easily disprove the basic concept of evolution, that a single genome splits into multiple genomes through increased complexity over time, right? Language is different in that if you have a word like dog, has undergone lots of different meaning adjustments over time, referring to the creature, referring to using it as a verb, being dog tired, referring to your friends as dog. It's involved a lot of change over time because it's not like a genome. It's definitionally what it is based on usage, consistent usage. So it's like if people consistently use it to refer to a friend, then everybody understands, what it means. It's not, look, life's syncretic. If you're trying to argue in favor of evolution, you are not losing the evolution debate because I'm a better debater. You are losing the evolution debate because evolution has long since lost the evolution debate. It just doesn't make any sense logically. Makes no sense. And they keep changing what comprises evolution. Until maybe 6 months ago, evolutionary scientists were still split into the camps of gradualism and punctuated equilibrium. which are two fundamentally contradictory explanations. Punctuated equilibrium was just disproved, according to some recent study I saw. And the fundamental explanation of punctuated equilibrium was disproved by some, I don't know, Scandinavian study or something. But of course, the reasons punctuated equilibrium came about is because gradualism was disproved, and it continues to be disproved by periodic extinction events. So if in fact gradualism were a correct understanding at all, then it would require the 4 billion years, but you don't have that. You only got 66 million. You got some species whose lifespans are thousands of years. You got some species whose lifespans are very, very short. And yet you don't see species with very short lifespans evolving more quickly or over time, over thousands of years, than species with dramatically longer lifespans. So we can disprove all the elements of it, as well as the holistic thing. We can definitionally disprove it. We can observationally disprove it. It doesn't make any sense. We've attempted to breed new species with dogs. We've bred them all the way down to Chihuahuas and Great Danes, both of which can still breed and produce reproductively viable offspring with wolves. So we've tested and falsified the speciation notion of maximizing the plasticity within the genome to create breeds. Should in fact create new species, but it doesn't. If the basic premise of evolution were correct, it would have created new species by now. After all, the principal mechanisms of evolution are maximally attained when humans purposefully do it, way more so than they could ever be attained in the natural world. So if you want to dismiss the notion of species as being meaningful at all, then you're still left trying to explain, then you come up with a word for those things that only mate with each other and produce reproductively viable offspring with each other. Like, I could fuck any number of things, right? I could fuck a whale, I could fuck a cow, I could fuck a horse, I could fuck whatever, right? But only one kind of thing can I make a baby with. So what word do we use to describe that class of thing? If you want to say species is not the right word to use, species is just an arbitrary taxonomy word, fine. But the fact that exists, that reality exists, that no matter how many things I fuck, only one of them can I impregnate. That reality exists, and we need a word for it, right? I mean, we don't know that life's synchronic. Could we fuck Neanderthals and make babies with them? If so, then they were also humans, right? If you don't want to use that as a meaningful distinction for species, then okay, what do we want to call that thing? That I can only hump these, right? At least in the status quo, we know that I can only hump and make babies with another human. I cannot hump any other kind of creature and make baby with them. That's true, right? Okay, so what is it that we call this thing? Like, I'm a different blank than monkeys, who are a different blank than dogs, who are a different blank than cats. What do we call that then? Look, if you don't trust yourself to read the science, then it makes sense to trust yourself to identify which is the most reliable scientist. So, it's like there are some kinds of science that I don't trust myself to read. I don't trust myself to make a judgment call on quantum physics. Like, in other words, I'm not going to read through two competing papers on quantum physics and correctly determine which one is right if the arguments involve a lot of math that I don't understand, right? So in that instance, it makes sense to use the heuristic and say, well, which of these has more legitimacy as a scientist? Whether or not your TI is going to determine whether or not you feel qualified to do the parsing yourself on what, right? So I feel qualified to do the parsing on most everything, but not absolutely everything. TE person is going to delegate that parsing to experts more frequently, but they're not necessarily going to accept what they hear because they're going to be NI as well. They're going to have a universal truth function as a dominant nature. So, you know, I'm talking about INTJs here if I didn't specify that. I back up and dumps truck full of TE around here, and yet often it is my FI, my compliments, which are known as leaf trimmer. SI ticked off, eyed me. Hypos intended. Well, no, leaf trimmer, look. One thing that you need to teach yourself to do, first and foremost, is go onto Google Scholar and look at various scholarly journals and look at the scopes of the claims they're making. Okay. And look at the abstract, at least, to explain what the justification is for the scope of the claims they're making. Now, what you're going to see in mainstream media, quote unquote, is somebody's done that process for you. And they've interpreted this work of science through their frame of reference. It's reasonable to get frustrated at the mainstream media for persistently interpreting science through a single frame of reference, sometimes the wrong frame of reference or whatever, right? Or for simply politicizing it at all, making it an agenda-based thing. But it is not correct to say that, therefore, we should consider the original science not worth anything. Remember, you can go on Google Scholar and you can look up any sort of question you want, basically, and you'll get scientific journal papers for it. You read a bunch of them, and it'll get increasingly easy for you to distinguish between which ones ought to be afforded a lot of legitimacy and which ones ought to be afforded less. And you'll note eventually over time that there's a strong correlation between scope of claim and that deservingness of legitimacy. The leaner the scope of the claim and the more robust the justification, the higher the legitimacy. So what you want to look for in terms of things that you shouldn't afford legitimacy is excessive scope of claim, which is something that I encounter all the time around here, right? And then look to see if there's a proportional amount of substantiation for the scope of the claim. You need to do that before you start commenting about science, okay? It's a long process. It's not a quick one. The first step is always humility. It's like, okay, I need to investigate I need to consider attempting this other person's approach. My biggest leaps in life have been instances where I've been kind of broken and said, okay, I'm going to stop thinking I know best. Stop thinking I know best from my experience. Stop thinking I know best from universally. Stop thinking I know best because I've deliberated it. And listen with the intent of following instructions. Now, for me, those instances were working under a master teacher who really knew what he was doing well and was really effective at classroom management, and me coming in with my ideology basically about how I don't like hierarchy, I don't like authority, I don't like the mechanisms of schooling and so forth, and having to learn to put the actual reality of doing the job first. In other words, to put aside my meta-rationalist approach of always critiquing the frame and actually execute within a given frame, like an executive, for example. Well, again, that's what I'm talking about with breadth of claim, leaf trimmer. It's like Winston's mom may be doing a very good job of executing that heuristic regarding affording given science its due and not affording interpretation too much due. and not conflating the two. But I'm not sure. I don't know. I have no comment about it really. I'm just saying it's not the case that simply using a heuristic that you afford people who've earned symbols of legitimacy is not inherently a bad approach or wrong necessarily. It's just less you can be right about more things at a lower rate of correctness. It's like faster typing but more errors. Of course, if you've done enough TISI, then that ceases to be an advantage. Okay, Leaf Tremor, fine. God, so combative. Just because I falsely accuse you of a bunch of bullshit, you get mad. It's like, why? God. I'm just defaming you publicly. What's the big deal? I'm joking. I'm sorry, Leaf Tremor. I'm sorry if I misrepresented what you were saying. I didn't mean to. It was an accident. I should have live stream insurance in case of accidents like this, so I can pay for the damage to your ego. 100 metaphysical dollars. And you have to give those to the metaphysical dent repair shop. I know you're not being combative. I'm being a little combative. Everybody wants to fight with me about things. Everybody wants to say things that make me want to fight with them about stuff, Defaming is a great word, isn't it? Isn't it a useful one? You're a stream insurance rep. Can you insure my live stream against fires? Fires and floods? I don't want any digital fires or digital floods to ruin my live streaming. I was happy to hear about the absence of a tsunami to go along with the recent 7.1 earthquake off of Japan. After the last equivalently sized earthquake at a similar spot created the Fukushima disaster. This one, simply because it was at a spot of the ocean that was fairly close to the last one, but at much deeper depth, it didn't create any tsunami. I debate better when I'm angry. Well, I've often said that me being angry doesn't affect what I say. I still make the same arguments, whether... If I didn't say hi to you, Rachel, I saw you earlier. If I didn't say hi, I'm sorry. Hi, Rachel. Hello, my darling. My precious wonder. I think I may have neglected to greet you. Forgive me. Let me kiss your pretend hand. When I'm not combative or when I'm not interested in arguing, then I tend to just turn everything into a joke. I just won't respond to things. Actually, I'll just respond to them with jokes because I just don't feel like fighting with people. It's like people are so intractable. It's like, but I have to remember what sort of hit me with NI Force last night. Oh, this is totally the exception. Here I am talking to my 80-whatever-year-old dad, and he is not like anybody else's stereotypical 80-year-old dad, right? When I ask him about political matters, he gives me great, detailed, intelligent, incredibly well-informed analysis of shit. Better than anybody I ever encounter on the internet, for sure. And of course, that was my whole life, from early childhood on. My dad never talked to me like I was a kid. He never seemed to understand that, being a kid meant, less capability or something. He always seemed to be kind of frustrated with my intuitarity, I guess. You can imagine. Imagine if you're an ESTJ and he is engaging in framing a discussion right. You can't communicate if the communication is refutable. I mean, there's always some sort of refutation to any kind of statement, whether or not it serves as actually rebutting the point in question or not is another question. But you can always offer some kind of refutation, even if it's just nuh-uh, right? Do you believe that every small act one does nudges the world a little more toward paradise or dystopia? Every act with moral weight. Okay, well, my position on acts with moral weight is that they are broadly infrequent for most people. So most people rarely have actual moral choices that they make. They either are just persisting in a habit of morality or faced with a non-moral decision. Somebody like me who speaks publicly, I encounter probably a lot more moral issues than most people do. To the extent that most people encounter moral issues in their lives, they probably link to things like, should I lie about this to somebody in particular, right? I generally don't find myself ever really asking that question. The answer is always no. But it doesn't mean I never catch myself. Well, actually, it doesn't mean I'm never caught misrepresenting something. Rachel's caught me on a couple of occasions. To my dad, mostly. It's like, I don't necessarily want to justify everything to my dad, so... but it doesn't excuse it. It's like, I can avoid lying and also, maintain control of the frame, kind of. So I have no excuse at all for lying. But in every instance of a moral choice, I think most of those choices nudge your own life a little bit more towards clarity or murkiness. I don't know if I'd call it paradise or dystopia, but I find in general, throughout the history of my life, being a good person has always paid off. And being a bad person has always paid off too, in a bad way. It's like, I seem to be very subject to karma. If I'm doing something that I know better, like I've already, because it is the case that sometimes I do things wrong or wrong shit because I don't have any experience about it yet. And so I don't know, and I make a wrong decision. I don't feel bad about those, and those typically don't incur karma. In fact, I get the opposite. I get like magically let off with a scratch from something. Mama, you're a wonderful, wonderful human being. Thank you for being such a wonderful human being. You make me feel moisture in my heart. So it's like, I really think that, the universe has really been set on easy mode for me. It gives me a chance to fuck up once, like every time, as long as it's sort of a legitimate fuck up and get away with it, kind of scot-free, whatever it is. Once I made that mistake once, I am not allowed to make that mistake again. If I know I'm doing it and I do it anyway, I will incur bad consequences. But that's just sort of a utilitarian explanation of it. It's very rewarding to engage with people in ways that are that are about our mutual humanity rather than about how we differ and how we can dehumanize these people or those people or whatever. You think NI-DOMs would be more open-minded to alternative possibilities that may not be generally accepted yet? Well, I do think that NI-DOMs know some things that turn out to be true that they can't justify. So typically NI-DOMs will have an economy of silence regarding that. In other words, especially INFJs understand that telling somebody a truth that can't be fully substantiated comes with costs to the truth teller. ENTP understands this too, but the INFJ and ENTP take different approaches to it. ENTP ignores NI and insists that everything I'm going to say, that it be as universally justifiable as possible. INFJ goes, I can't explain why these things that are true are universally justifiable, so I'm going to keep quiet about them most of the time. I've had some bad experiences telling people them before, even if I get proven true. So that's the INFJ reality. INTJs are more likely to tell you what's wrong and what to do or something, and then get frustrated if you don't listen to them, maybe, or just throw up their hands and go back to their precious or whatever. I don't know. Unless this is their precious, in which case, then they continue paying attention to it, I guess. I mean, I think you're underestimating Winston's mom's analysis capacity substantially, Leaf Trimmer. I don't think Winston's mom delegates all the thinking or deliberation, or I guess you'd say epistemology, to outside sources. She probably just relies more on her NI than her TI to determine the legitimacy of something. NI is about synergistic truths that are not meaningfully deconstructible. So, in other words, you can't say which part of the engine is the one that makes it go, right? I can't explain to you exactly why the engine makes your car go. I have to explain a complicated process, right? So, and it's a holistic reality. So if I take out one part of the engine, it doesn't go, it comprises 1% of the total engine. It doesn't go 1% slower or work 1% less well. It doesn't work at all. So that's what I mean by synergy, right? It's an engine's reality is greater than the sum of its parts, because it's only when you put all those parts together in that way that it creates this thing called forward momentum, or this energy that you can convert to forward momentum. So yada yada, however you want to say it. I don't know. I want to consider sloth a sin if we're created in God's image and stuff. So if we are created in God's image, does that mean God has within him all of those sins? Or are all of those sins ways in which we deviate from the holistic truth of God that subsumes all those sins and resolves them concurrently? In other words, talk to the hand, Leaf Trimmer. Talk to the hand. That's what Winston's mom's telling you, okay? Okay, Leaf Trimmer, will you stop arguing with absolutely everyone? We have some pleasant conversations instead of always arguing. That's the thing. Let's work on pleasant conversations. Let's talk about the weather. How's the weather where you are, Leaf Trimmer? Is it raining? Is it snowing? Is your smile slowly flowing from the ground up to your face, making you a pretty vase? Leaf trimmer, so what? I mean, I'd be ticked off too if you said all that dismissive shit, right? It doesn't mean she's wrong or bad because she has emotions. Okay. Oh, hi, Peter. Peter wants some food. Okay, Mr. Man. You don't have to honk at me all day. I get the picture. I'm going to take this to show everybody the peacock, okay? I know you've seen it before, but I'm going to show you anyway. Don't complain. Oh, come on. I said don't complain. You're complaining. All right, Peter. Peter, peacock eater. Let me get you some food. Let's see if you can see him there. Yeah, you can sort of see him. All right. Oops. I kicked that thing. That's fine. You can still see him. Yeah, well, I did make him a moderator. That's true. He definitely deserves to be one. So I don't know if he wants the job or not. It doesn't come with any responsibilities, just powers. Oh, look, it's Kitty Freshness Pants. Isn't that nice? Kitty Freshness Pants came to visit us as well. So, as I was discussing in an earlier stream, it is the case that all animals except dogs, well, even dogs probably, that all animals like cat food. Be they possum, be they skunk, be they raccoon, be they dog, be they cat, be they peacock, all animals like cat food. Rachel and I went into nap earlier, and I got up earlier than she did, and Kitty doesn't like that kind of cat food. Kitty has her own special cat food that she only eats one kind of cat food. She's super picky. Indolence, yeah, basically. Sloth and indolence are very similar. You might call them synonyms, I suppose. Yeah, he's pretty majestic. We try to maximize the majesty of things around here. You know, I like things that are majestic and glorious. So that's why I've invited Peter to maintain residence here at Strauss Estate. He actually doesn't live here. He lives out in the street, you know, out front. But he comes here and squawks at me to feed him or Rachel to feed him. And we do. And he often says thank you, too, when he's done eating. He'll go, squawk, and walk away. So, you know, we've additionally had the skunk come and basically poke its head in and say, hey, I need some cat food too. I've had the raccoon knocked over the trash can outside when I was still awake, but in here, and I went outside and when I got outside, the raccoon was standing over kind of like over further to the right of where Pete is. And and looking like he was just waiting for me to throw him cat food too. So I threw him some cat food. We've got a possum that I don't want to feed. I want the possum not to get food or anything because I hate possums because they're gross. But I'm not going to hurt the possum or anything. But I'm not going to intentionally feed the possum. Rachel has made a staunch and admirable effort to not feed non-peacocks, as I have as well. Because sometimes there'll be other peacocks that come back here and they want to get up in on this shit too. And we're like, no, we already have too many unofficial pets. Okay? Too many unofficial pets. If it's the same thing as saying that the devil makes idle hands make the devil's work. You know, men like guys, I actually have a 22 bolt action rifle here with 22 ammunition. I don't know if it's LR, but I don't want to shoot any of these animals. My dad shoots the squirrel with a pellet gun, but I'm not. That's not my style, really. That's such an ESTJ move, right? There's a small tree by the peacock. Oh, that's a camellia bush. It's got camellias on it. Oh, a long rifle? Oh, okay. Illuminatis worship the devil? Are all devil worshippers Illuminatis or just all Illuminatis devil worshippers? Let me ask you a TI question, Nakamura Shelton. If only Illuminatis worship the devil and Jody worships the devil, is Jody an Illuminati? If all devil worshippers are Illuminatis and no Illuminatis love Jesus, then does that mean that everybody who doesn't love Jesus is a worshiper of the devil? TI questions involving devil worship. Does anybody really worship the devil? Like, what would be the purpose of worshiping the devil? Like, I'm going to purposely choose evil. Nobody really worships the devil, right? All Illuminati are Freemasons, but not all Freemasons are part of the Trilateral Commission. How many Trilateral Commissions does it make to make a unilateral commission? Is it 3, or does that make a 9 lateral commission? Okay. If I love Jesus, do I have to love Mary and Joseph too? Is it acceptable to be Christian and hate Mary, for example? Have like a weird thing where you just, I don't know, I'm Christian, but I just fucking cannot stand the Virgin Mary. Is that okay? Can you still be Christian and have that position? I'm Christian, but I believe the wise men were actually really unwise. They should have brought totally different presents. Those are not appropriate presents for a newborn baby. That's my argument on the wise men. The wise men, I can't give you any details about it at the moment, Lee Chum. I have to. It sounds very familiar, like I've read about it before, but I don't remember the deets. Maybe if I started reading it, I would. You know, if I started reading about it, I'd remember it. I did the thing that the NI fourth people or poor NI people need to remember in general is that I did go through an extensive period of time where I did a lot of research on a lot of these various conspiracies. It is incorrect to assume that I'm uninformed about conspiracy stuff in general, although it might be correct to assume that I'm uninformed about some of the more contemporary ones, because I haven't wasted the time to look into those things much in a while, you know. I came to understand, like I have everything in life, you understand the mechanics of sort of correct conspiracy argumentation versus incorrect conspiracy argumentation by experiencing a lot of both. or a lot of one and some of both, and some of the other. No one worships the devil, but he's deceptive enough to mold your mind in a way that makes you sympathetic to his cause. Like, come on. Evil's okay, right? You'll like it a little bit. Do I believe in God exist? Well, I pray to God regularly, not every day, but regularly. If you want to conclude that, therefore, I believe he exists, you can conclude that. But I mean, my position is arguments about existentiality are both silly and also not part of a properly run magical thinking frame. So in other words, I don't use argumentation in my magical thinking, because what distinguishes magical thinking from rational thinking is magical thinking is not justified by substantiations that universally verify as legitimate. You think EXXPs are the best type of salesman? I would suspect ENFJs are the best salesmen. Maybe ESTPs and ESFPs, maybe second and third. Because I think being a good salesman involves a lot of doing, a lot of playing the percentages, right? That not everyone's going to be a sale, but if you keep hammering the same approach, then it's going to pay off at a certain percentage, right? I mean, the weird thing is, well, you're not being too much. You're fine. I'm not saying evil is okay. I'm saying, like, it seems weird to say that somebody is deceived into being sympathetic with evil. The thing is, one nice thing about all the media that we have is that we get to experience a lot of evil without actually experiencing evil. So we get to watch a show where, like, a lot of these animes have various scenes of child abuse or domestic abuse or something like that. Usually I kind of fast forward over them. But we get to experience some representation of evil without actually having to be subjected to it. And I think it's created in the contemporary mind a much clearer understanding of what comprises evil. So it's still hard to meaningfully apply that to, like, sort of third party externals, like policy arguments or whatever, political arguments. But when we encounter it face to face, we tend to agree. Like I've said before, a lot of people who are advocating for X, Y, or Z, if they had to do the thing they're advocating for themselves, they would never do it. They'd find it appalling, sickening, and find themselves unable to do the thing. But there's a disconnect between advocating and doing. So it's helpful that we get to see so many representations of evil in that regard, but it also kind of creates this false reality where everything's just a symbol of itself and nothing is real. So, it's tricky. It's like, I get what you're saying, that people end up doing bad things, but to say that they're deceived into doing them, it seems odd to me. My experience is, when I've done bad things, it's been either out of ignorance, or out of some kind of willful ignoring, willful ignorance, which is much worse than the first one. Or I have this sense that I did the best I could at the time in general. I look back at how I behaved in the past. I don't carry a lot of guilt with me because I haven't done a lot of large wrongdoings to people. Never killed anybody, never, as far as I know. So the serial killers are an example of moral clarity, but they're only an example of moral clarity because they're not a specific instance, right? And even there, you get disagreement about what ought to be done with them. So we might all agree that a serial killer is engaged in evil behavior, but whether we agree that that means he's we're agreeing about his behavior, not necessarily about his person. So some people say that means he's an evil person. Other people will say, no, he too is capable of redemption, So there's going to continue to be disagreement about even something like that when you take a specific instance and you try to apply any sort of principles towards it like that. Okay, but then how are you morally responsible for anything? If all bad behavior is a result of your being deceived, then how do you get to be morally responsible for anything? Oughtn't people be accountable for their own sinful ways, recognize over time that they're prone to this kind of wrongdoing and nix it from their behavioral regime? Yeah, that guy is relentless. It's like, I guess it obviously provides some sort of rush, some sort of gratification, or else he wouldn't keep doing it. It's like, I kind of came to terms with this when my first wife cheated on me and I went through detective mode, that finding something gave me a rush. I really wanted to find her guilty of more and more and more. It was sick, it's a sick kind of pattern of obsessiveness or something. Let me move this, sorry. Oh, okay. The thing is, of course, for the person who's stuck in that spot, whatever gratification he's getting from the little rush he gets from coming and putting some, spiteful comment about me on a live stream, it's costing him a lot of sort of his headspace and his time and energy towards something that's not going to serve his interests at all. Even if he were successfully being spiteful towards me, it's still just destructive energy. It's nothing. There's not even a basic claim to justice. Like in this instance, he's shitting on me in this way, and in another instance, he's shitting on me in some other way. It doesn't really matter. It's just, regardless, okay, slur words. Yeah, I know. It'll be in his hospital bed at night. He's still making new accounts, trying to get me, Of course, if you never actually get me, I guess you got two choices. You got to either recognize that you wasted a bunch of time or insist that I will not allow this time wasted to be spent lost in vain. Sunk cost fallacy, you know? Socionics has some good things to say, and it flounders around in its own lack of a clear framing. So the problem is it doesn't really distinguish between what kind of dichotomies are representative of attentional manners or mechanisms. It mistakenly lumps all kind of attention into information metabolism, which really is only the deliberation functions metabolize in any meaningful sense. I guess you could say the interface functions do somewhat as well, but it's like sociology doesn't do a good job of distinguishing where it's being metaphorical in terms of its explanations, where it's being actually mechanical in terms of describing processes that we could simulate, where it's being driven by a foundation in values taxonomy versus where it's being driven by taxonomy of attentional manners, since it doesn't begin with the idea that there are 4 different kinds of attentional manners: action, deliberation, knowledge, and interface. It's already off to a bad start. Yeah, my first wife did cheat on me. What type was she? ISFP, I think, and not a healthy one. The answer to which MBTI type has the nature to cheat a lot is it correlates much more strongly with healthiness than anything else. Unhealthy people who have an unhealthy attachment style, who don't trust very easily at all, are also not themselves trustworthy at all. I think that my first wife cheated primarily because she was damaged in childhood by various things or whatever. And of course, I also was not ready to be a healthy relationship partner. I came into that relationship with a lot of insecurities and a lot of expectations that were crazy that I got from basically reading a lot of Sword and Dragons books and stuff. I mean, it's fine to not trust easily. It's like not trusting easily is not indicative of having a attachment disorder. Anybody who's an NI-DOM or an SI-DOM even is not going to trust easily, because SI-DOMs trust after they've known you for a while, and they trust you to behave the same way you always do, which if you're an ENTP, you don't, and then they get confused. If you're an NI-DOM, they need to have enough explanations, like pattern-based explanations of you, to feel like that you're subsumed by their NI knowledge, so that they can understand why the plasticity within you will never grow this direction, but will sometimes grow this direction. It's like every individual is a NI-DOM. INFPs are not NI-DOMs, Nakamura Shelton. INFPs are FI-DOMs. So anyway, what does TI need for trust? I mean, TI is not a trust-based function. It's the default of not trusting. It's the default of, I will check what you're saying by myself. And it's not because I don't trust you. It's because I don't trust things that I haven't deliberated out myself. An example being Rachel and I driving out of the Popeyes. She had just looked up on her phone something that I had deliberated out wrong in my head. So I'm like, I can't figure this out. Look it up. She told me what it was. And then as I'm driving out of the thing, I ask her, what was it again? And she tells me, and I decide to work it out in my head to check to make sure she's right. Now, keep in mind, the reason I had to check the internet in the first place is I couldn't figure out in my head because I was being confused and dumb at the moment. It's like, this is hard. I don't want to figure it out. Figuring out ssuartscire intertype relations always involves for me going, okay, what's the equivalent? So my mya type is this. I know what my mya type is. So what's the equivalent of mya type to me between mya and mya? And then I started turning to TI in my head, and I go, this is hard. Sometimes I get confused, But being TI tool means I still default to, I don't trust what you just said. I need to figure out myself if I understand how that answer is determined. If there's a process by which I can determine that answer, the status of it, the legitimacy of it or whatever, then I need to do that. But of course, I don't need to do that always. TI DOMs need for trust someone to clean up after them. Yes, TI DOMs do need someone to clean up after them. That's true. But you know what? That's a fairly this isn't actually an apartment. Mike Jones. That should be a TI question in typing sessions. What should? What does TI need for trust? That's a TI question. I don't want to use TI questions that require people to know what TI means. Because then I'm testing too much their knowledge of my understanding of cognitive functions or something. What is required for you to trust somebody is a good question, though. That is a very good question in general. Ssuartscire relations should be made into TI questions for your typing sessions. Oh, that's a good idea in general. Kind of complicated, but it's not a bad idea. In other words, if I can present to somebody a clear representation of an ENFJ and get their authentic response to that type, that'll be informative about what type they are, but it will take some data gathering before I could meaningfully use that, because I'd have to see what the correlations are. Like, just because somebody else isn't the same type as you may be rather combative against them. You might also be rather combative against somebody who's, say, your like ES. I might be combative against ESFP. I might also be combative against ENTP. So combativeness is in and of itself not really good, a combative response to such a thing. Am I still not getting it right, or are you delayed a little bit, right? I'm talking about like ENTP is to ENFJ as man is to man. Oh, I see what you're saying. Okay, I get you. Never mind. That makes a lot more sense. Now I understand what you're saying. You're correct. That would be a good TI question. All right. So what is your life path number, Eric? I'm life path 7. I believe I'm one of the 22? 22. My life path is 22. Hey, look, everybody, it's Steve Jones. I've been divorced twice because I'm a loser who sits in a room all day and smokes weed. Well, it's some numerology thing. I score well on the conventional magical thinking frames of astrology and numerology. Yeah. So it's like I got a master number, and it's supposed to be like have accomplished big things or whatever. I agree. I should accomplish big things. But you know what? Steve Jones has a really good point. I have been divorced twice because I'm a loser who sits in my room all day and smokes weed. That's a pretty good point. So anyway, and then you know what else is really kind of neato? Is Rachel and I have very excellent matching of our biorhythm compatibility. Yeah. If you put two people's birthday into this biorhythm compatibility calculator, any random two people's birthday, it won't be nearly as compatible as me and Rachel. We're like 98% or something.
I'll put up the link for him.
So I'm very lucky about all of these, indicators. In other words, it is the case that I have seem to have been given a life that's sort of been set on easy mode. And astrology and numerology would tend to suggest that that would be the case as well. So it's not inconsistent with my experience that I've been lucky, Like I was saying earlier, it periodically re-strikes me. I mean, no, try any two birthdays in there, Leaf Trimmer. Go to the one that we use anyway. I checked it many times against like random people. It's surprising we're almost uniquely well matched. Yeah. Besides two people with the exact same birthday.
Yeah.
So it's weird. It's like I'm not somebody who places any weight on that because I can't really use it to justify anything. Same with the astrology stuff. It's not like I'm not looking for NI explanations. I'm typically ignoring them because it's fifth slot for me. And I can't use those things as arguments. So they don't seem particularly, I guess, of compelling interest to me. But at the same time, I got to admit, to the extent that they say she's supposed to go pretty easy for me, they're pretty right. In fact, I remember one time Winston's mom put an astrology thing up for me that mentioned that I would have a weak stomach. It had a lot of little details like that were actually accurate, very accurate. And I was like, well,
That's the thing. Honestly, it's in the balance. There are some things that I definitely like. If it speaks to you, you should take it. But if there's stuff in there that like makes you upset, just.
Oh yeah, I don't get upset by it. I was interested though. This morning, somebody came in, Rachel, and said, asked me what type I was or sign I was, and I said I was Taurus, and she said, "Oh, I would have thought you were a Gemini," and I said, "Oh, you were actually you were here. I remember you lolling about it or something." I said, "Well, apparently I'm a Gemini moon," and they said, "Well, that's supposed to be your internal part." And I said, well, that's the same as my external part.
Yeah. It shows. Your Gemini moon shows.
So I guess that's the point, is that I'm such an extrovert that I don't really have an introverted part that's different than the thing I have here. Mm-hmm. When I'm not having these conversations out loud, I'm having them with myself in my head in general. A friend of mine told me why she and her ex broke up and just stated her point of view. I didn't want to make judgment on it until hearing her ex's view. Is that TI? Could be. I mean, it could be SI, it could be TI. If you immediately thought of it in terms of rendering a judgment and wanting to hear both sides, that's very TI. Is if your immediate response was, "Oh, I'm so sorry. I hope you're feeling okay." That's FI or FE. In terms of sloth, think relations between men and women, feminism, and MGTOW, thinking along the lines of social constructs, i.e. experimenting the Hegelian dialect, no wisdom, no judgment. I think society in the West anyway has shifted away from an even split of different work into a disconnect between work and sustainability to some extent. It's like, whether or not there's a dude who supports a chick or a chick who supports a dude is kind of a crapshoot these days. Some people are like, I don't believe in that kind of relationship at all. We should both be self-supporting. I'm not like that, but some people are. Do you believe if someone takes their MBTI type compatibility, marriage won't fail or release longer? Please tell me your opinion. I mean, I think you are much more well suited to be with one or two different possible alternative types than the others. And so a successful relationship is more likely to gel out of a correct, quote unquote, pairing than out of an incorrect pairing. However, I wouldn't have thought that, I wouldn't say that ISFJ and ESTJ is necessarily a great pairing, although it's not a bad pairing necessarily, but I wouldn't call my parents' marriage a failure at all. They were married for their, they got married on the later side, like late 20s. What did you time out Leaf Trimmer for?
Me?
No, not you.
Oh.
Legends Fall. Let me check what the trusted verify. Fair enough. I kind of agree with you. I appreciate the ESTP trigger pull occasionally. The ENTPs can stand around chatting for quite a while when something needs to be shot, Are we sure we need to shoot this thing? Don't I need to talk about it a lot more first? ESP's like, well, I guess that takes care of that. Oh, he shat on Winston's mom again for no good reason, portraying her as some sort of mindless expert fetishist or something. And hence, I guess the best description of his crime was Legends Fall. He was, in fact, quote unquote, being a dick. Not the greatest crime in the world, but if you persist in the same infraction / misdemeanor enough times, somebody's got to enforce it, or it just becomes not anything but just meagity mew. And nobody wants meagity mew. Except the meagity mew kids. They're big fans of it.
Yeah.
Can you make a video on types and their ideal types for a partner? Yeah, I could do something like that, I guess. I have various videos about that, but I could explain who I think the best romantic partners are for each of the types or something. That'd be a quick video. Just go. If I didn't explain too much about why, it would be quick. I just said meow or meow for meow because these are meow and these are meow. If I just do a sort of an assessment of the absolute values on all values. So like, who has a sound? Also values as well? Huh? Who has the same absolute values as you is an interesting question. So, dumb genius, what type are you? What type do you self-identify as? A poo and poo poo? I'm not familiar with that type. Bro. Please, I prefer Brohan, Brozovic, or Rachel's recent invention, Brohampshire. Is there a name for the day after St. Valentine's Day? Excellent question.
Oh.
Yes, it's called Foxing Day. It's like Boxing Day, except what you do, you take all the strings you collected on St. Valentine's Day and donate them to a fox charity. Which says to you, why do we want all these strings? That's all part of the Foxing Day festivities. Isn't the day after Valentine's something to do with pancakes, romance, and magic? No, Winston's mom. The day after Valentine's Day is when a very committed weirdo comes and accuses you once again of failing as a boyfriend on Valentine's Day. That's what happens on Foxing Day. It's called Valentine's Failure Critique Day. That's February 15th, or is that what today is? 15th?
Yeah.
It's Valentine Failure Critique Day. Right, you were all famous people, not Kamara Sheldon. See, that's the basic algorithm around here. If I've talked to you, that makes you a famous person. Let's say you're George Clooney. I've never talked to you. You're a well-known celebrity, but you're not a famous person. That's fair, right? That's fair. fair naming protocol. You have never failed as a boyfriend. Well, you got me beat there. But on the other hand, I've never failed as a girlfriend. So you messed up a birthday real bad. Effie got me ripped apart. Are you with an SFJ? You want to talk about a crime that's unforgivable in an SFJ's eyes? It's don't do something special for their birthday and Valentine's Day.
For the days, the main days.
Yeah, the days. I mean, Richard and I have a huge ritualistic procession of events scheduled for St. Patrick's Day, of course. This is, it wasn't a joke. It was a jab. There's been a joke and a jab. Which MBTI types can gel romantically best with INFP? Okay, so let's look at your absolute values. FI is an absolute value. And then SI is an absolute value. And SE is an absolute value. And FE is an absolute value. So one type that you would get along with well for a while, but would probably fall apart, would be your conflictor type, which is to say everything flips. Like FE Dom and then SE third. That is to say ENFJ. ENFJ and INFP will get along really well, but never really be exactly speaking the same language. Not really talking past each other, but not understanding why what the other person is saying is relevant, really. Okay, well, leaf trimmer.
I heard it. I heard it in your voice that it was leaf trimmer.
It's like, you know, you should also pay attention. There's a little meter as you're playing this game, leaf trimmer. It's called negativity meter or complaining meter. Okay. It is true that you have here an opportunity to complain about this and to argue that you were treated unfairly in some regard. It's also an opportunity to willfully choose to make your complaints a lot meter go down. Right? I mean, you do fuss about things a lot, right? I've always got to be like, leaf trimmer. You don't hear me say, Winston's mom, very often, right? You don't hear me. You do occasionally hear me say, Legends Fall, about his Trump stuff, but that's recent. You're not hearing me say, Nakamura Shelton, will you Nakamura it off with your Nakamura INFP stuff? So anyway, best type for INFP, I think immediate ease of getting along, ENFJ, because you have the same absolute values. If you get ESFJ though, then you've got your 2-3 flipped, which is probably better. In other words, you've got SI absolute, they've got SI tool, you've got NE tool, they've got NE absolute. So probably ESFJ would be a better choice for that. However, you could also argue that ESTJ is the best choice because that's what Socionics says. The thing is, if you have TE Dom with you FI Dom, then both of you meet the duality thing. But additionally, you're both still physical types. INFPs are fundamentally physical first, FI first. And so it makes sense for physical types to get with other physical types and metaphysical types to get with other metaphysical types. If you get with an ENFJ, you're getting with one of the most metaphysical types. And so that's where it's not going to really connect long term. I think to connect long term, you need to be equivalently physical / metaphysical, as well as having good lineup of the absolute values and instrumental values. So your odd numbered values, 1, 3, 5, and 7 are absolute, and your even numbered values are instrumental. So for INFP then, FI, SI, FE, and SE are absolute values. And NE, NI, TE, and TI are instrumental values. This is partially why the INFP is my supervisor, because for them, expert intuition is instrumental. They see me as using it too much, basically, or as it being too much of a frame of reference rather than a means to an end. Concurrently, my absolute value is polar, FI, is their absolute value Dom. So it's like they can win on quality of the value regarding they can win regarding FI. In other words, FI is important to both of us, and I can't defend myself on FI. NE is important to only one of us, and they can use NE just as well as I can almost. So my understanding is not socionics theory. It's a little different, but it takes, I take advantage. I think socionics' best work is in its intertype relations. I think that's where it does its most meaningful work, because it provides a scaffolding upon which we can make some corrections that need to be corrected. So socionics doesn't account for the fact that there are absolute and instrumental values, and it doesn't account for the fact that there are physical or metaphysical, or what you might call experiential or communicative functions. Those define your frames of reference, the dominant one. So your dominant frame of reference, if your FI dom, is experiential, not meaning-based, even if your tool function is meaning-based. So it's like INFPs are kind of a mysterious foreign thing to me, because they're good at all the ideation, but they do it about experience, and that seems fundamentally alien to me. Not about like SI experience, which I can understand. Like an SI, a very SI kind of song is that song Stressed Out by that band 21 Pilots, I believe they're called. And can you explain why ENTJ ISTP works well, assuming it does? Well, I would say I wouldn't really expect it to work well, ISTP and ENTJ especially. You'd have the same absolute. No, you wouldn't. You'd have different. So, okay. The 2-3 would work fine. 2-3 with ISTP, ENTJ is TISE versus NISE. So, is SE NI versus NISE, right? So they're just back, they're mirrored, okay? Or flipped, But then you have the 1-4s mirrored. So that's the equivalent of INFJ and ENTP. But the difference is the ISTP is fundamentally a communicative type with TI DOM, and the ENTJ is fundamentally an experiential type with TE DOM. So in my mind, you'd be better off with an ENFJ, which gives you both the 2-3 flip. Still, you still have the same 2-3 flip. You've got the NI2 and SE3, but you have the duality 1-4 back and forth, which, because you're a judger, means you have the same kind of frame of reference, the same metaphysical frame of reference. So in my opinion, ENFJs are a better choice for ISTPs than are ENTJs. Although probably ENTJ, ISTP, if they got together as a partnership and were both, say, lovers and a team at work, they probably accomplish quite a great endeavor. The combination of those two seems like a great combination for accomplishing something, but it's a little bit different than having a good relationship, I guess. I feel suddenly nauseous. Like, I guess I need to eat. So I'm going to wrap this up. It's pushing 3 hours now. Thanks so much, Falmo Hot. Again, I appreciate it. You're a wonderful human being. And right. So Legends Fall, I agree for P types. Perceiving axis should be the opposite. and judging axis, perceiving axis should be mirrored, and judging axis should be flipped for P. But I think for the J's, they should both be flipped. Flipped means they're on the same side of the stack, but the other way. So 2-3 versus 3-2 is flipped. 1-4 versus 4-1 is flipped. If my 1 is your 5, that's mirrored. That means your 1-5, 4-8 is mirrored. Okay, and of course you can't have them both mirrored and flipped as well, as per the ESTP, ENTP. That's mirrored and flipped 1-4. And it's identical for the 2-3. Okay, so thanks a lot for being here, and I appreciate your attention and time and so forth. I'm glad you made a snowman. I hope it never melts.